You are watching Part 7. Good morning 001. Please don't keep this to yourself. Like, subscribe, and share if you choose to accept this mission. This combat wounded veteran YouTube channel will not self-destruct. This video will begin in 3, 2, 1. My name is Cloak, John Cloak, 001. I come to you today humbled and in good spirits, because this combat wounded veteran YouTube channel is now monetized. Thank you for your respect in advance. Bear with me as I continue with my true story of the days before that very day, and the days that followed my finding Osama bin Laden. Keep taking notes. Do your fact-checking. You know now that my true story is copyrighted and archived in the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. I begin now in Part 7, where I left off in Part 6. I am coming forward with the truth as I know it to be. I am the eyewitness. You can, and you should trust me. Support is critical. Let the truth step forward. My soul. During 1988 I watched as my little bubby was born at Gorgas, U.S. Army Hospital in the Panama Canal Zone. 3 weeks later, he was dying in the same hospital of his birth. Days later, his doctor walked up to me and said, "I'm going to take one more spinal tap and a blood sample. They had already taken many from your baby so that I can send it to Walter Reed. If they do not know what the problem is, I give your son 3 days to live." It took 2 nurses and the doctor to hold my little bubby down while they drew fluid from his spine. This put tears into the eyes of his mother and me. It's a horrible thing to see a 3-week-old baby fighting so hard that 2 nurses cannot hold his arms and legs still. His scream was that of the knowledge of pure betrayal. I immediately went off by myself and began to pray for my little bubby. It was long past time. I then called home to Florida and informed my family I needed their prayers also. 3 hours later, a nurse walked up to me holding a large medical dictionary. She said, "We have received an emergency message from Walter Reed concerning your son. They said he has listeria and to treat it with gamma goblin." I did not know what listeria was and asked. The nurse replied, "We didn't know what it was either and had to look it up." She then opened the medical dictionary and read to me the description of listeria. On the internet, Wikipedia describes listeria as follows: Listeria monocytogenes is a bacterium commonly found in soil, stream water, sewage, plants, and food. 1. Each bacterium is gram-positive and rod-shaped. Listeria are known to be the bacteria responsible for listeriosis, a rare but lethal foodborne infection that has a devastating case fatality rate of 25%. 2. Salmonella, in comparison, has a less than 1% mortality rate. 3. They are incredibly hardy and able to grow in temperatures ranging from 4 degrees Celsius, 39 degrees Fahrenheit, the temperature of a refrigerator, to 37 degrees Celsius, 99 degrees Fahrenheit, the body's internal temperature. 1. Furthermore, listeriosis' deadliness can be partially attributed to the infection's ability to spread to the nervous system and cause meningitis. 1. Finally, listeria has a particularly high occurrence rate in newborns because of its ability to infect the fetus by penetrating the endothelial layer of the placenta. 2. June 1989, I had spent 2.5 years of my 3-year re-enlistment for Fort Clayton, Panama, at Fort Kobe, in the Panama Canal Zone, another betrayal. I had re-enlisted for Fort Clayton and a non-airborne job. Then once in Panama and at Fort Clayton, was told that if I did not take an airborne slot, I would never be promoted again. Noriega and his military guns had systematically kidnapped American soldiers and/or American military dependents to the extent that the U.S. government began sending all U.S. military dependents in Panama back to the United States. This is how my bubby and his mother entered the United States. Because my bubby's mother did not speak English, my bubby was 9 months old, and this was the first time out of her country. It created a hardship, and I was reassigned to the 82nd Airborne, United States Army. I was given a job as Air Items N.C.O., under a first lieutenant in the S4 section of a battalion in the 325th AIR, Airborne Infantry Regiment. While still harboring ill feelings toward other NCOs, back at my unit in Panama, for their constant bombardment of disrespectful comments about my biracial child. Such as, "How is your hooch baby? Is he still alive?" To include bad counseling statements from my squad leader for going to the medics when I had a bad case of diarrhea. This was later found to be a parasite in my blood that was keeping me from properly digesting my food. The many months of patrolling the jungles around Howard Air Force Base in Panama left the officers in charge very stupid, as they had us sleep in the same spot that 400 other paratroopers had been sleeping in for 3 months, with no urinals. The entire area was saturated with urine and feces as we slept. The urine and feces had built up over many weeks, and when we pointed it out, were ordered to sleep in it anyway. Hence, my bad case of diarrhea was born, and after 6 months of going to the medics about it, it was found to be a parasite in my blood that was keeping me from properly digesting my food. It was not like regular diarrhea. There were no fevers or intestinal cramps. It was all water. Once I raised hell about being given a bad counseling statement for it, because I kept returning to the medics each morning before my daily duties began. I was given permission to enter the hospital for test, then given a very small pink pill to kill the parasite in my blood. You might think that doing my job every day of the 6 months I had diarrhea, and not missing a moment of required training or live missions, it would have warded off any bad counseling statements for going to the medics often. Nevertheless, it didn't. My biracial marriage and biracial child brought out the worst behavior in everyone around me. Once the word of my biracial marriage and biracial child got around, animosity had a way of totally engulfing the minds of the people I worked with. Dec 1989, I was called at home and given our call-out notification. Operation Just Cause had begun. Once at my unit area, I was informed that I would be filling in for the S4 RTO, radio transmission operator, and E4, because I had just returned from a tour of duty in Panama and knew the area well, to include speaking a little Spanish. Special note, our company first sergeant, S4 section sergeant, and our ammo supply NCO were all told that they were not needed and would be remaining behind. Other unit members were also told this. The S4 RTO, radio transmission operator, is a support position, not a combat position like, say, a radio transmission operator of a rifle platoon. The S4 captain had no mission. He was just there to give support when needed, such as resupply, and I was to follow him around in case he had need of a radio. I was never given a mission briefing, only told that we were jumping onto the international airport at night and that I was to link up with the S4 captain on the ground. We all had to stand in line for shots, and then return to our temporary unit area to pack. While preparing for a combat night jump into the country of Panama, we were all packing our rucksacks, backpacks, with the equipment assigned to us for our wartime duties. When the S4 lieutenant walked up to me with 2 armloads of equipment and said, "Cloak, put this in your rucksack. I don't have room for it." The RTO equipment I already had in my rucksack was very large, as it was the old Vietnam-era radio, along with 2 extra batteries and accessories such as the antenna and microphone. My rucksack was totally full. So, I said, "Lieutenant, my rucksack is full. Take this equipment and give it to someone else who does not have the same load I have. I'm the acting S4 RTO. I have to be able to keep up with the S4 so that his radio is within his reach at any given moment." The lieutenant snapped at me saying, "I don't have room in my rucksack. You put it in your rucksack and carry it for me. That's an order, Cloak." I then had to completely empty out my rucksack and leave my own personal items such as extra socks, extra uniform, extra water, and completely take apart my 3 days' worth of MREs. Then stuff the individual packages into the outside pockets of my rucksack/backpack, crushing them into place. Only then could I get the lieutenant's equipment packed alongside the radio inside my rucksack/backpack. We then flew for many hours in a C-141 Starlifter for our nighttime mass tactical assault into the country of Panama. As I exited the door at 500 feet over the international airport in Panama City, Panama, red tracer rounds from AK-47s were buzzing by me and going up through my parachute. Normally, there are 5 regular rounds before each tracer round. That means for every 1 red tracer round you see, there has been 5 regular rounds before it. I saw about 20 go past me up into my parachute. With the deafening sound of jet engines, I looked below me to see the outline of a C-141 Starlifter passing by in the darkness. This was a horrifying event. I thought I would be hit by the next C-141 that was still coming. Until I realized by the starlight, I was looking at the shadow of the C-141 Starlifter that was going by over the top of me, and I was about to hit the runway. Grabbing the release strap that held my rucksack, I gave it a strong jerk, releasing my rucksack and weapons case to fall the length of the 30-foot cord they were attached to. Before it reached the end of the 30-foot cord, I heard my rucksack hit hard on the concrete. I then hit the runway and twisted my right ankle as bullets hit the concrete runway inches from my head. Pulling on the cord, I found my equipment not far from me. Opening my weapons case, I pulled out my M16A2 and took aim over my rucksack. In between me and the flash of enemy weapons were friendly soldiers. Then suddenly another C-141 Starlifter passed overhead, dropping more airborne infantry soldiers. They were landing everywhere. I could not return fire, because members of my unit were in between me and the enemy. It was after midnight and dark 30. I would not take the chance of killing my own unit members, and because bullets were still hitting all around me, I low-crawled into the high weeds behind me and out of sight of the enemy soldiers who could see me as bullets were still hitting all around me. Not firing through a friendly soldier was deeply ingrained in my consciousness, from the long-range patrolling course I had gone through while I was in the Special Forces qualification course. Because, while in the long-range patrolling course and in a listening hold, we were attacked from my rear, which was on the other side of the complete 360 circle we were all laying in, and I had turned around firing M16 blanks across and through my unit toward the attackers, thus, killing my own people and destroying any favorable outcome to the mission. I was yelled at by the Green Beret instructors until I knew better than to ever do this again, no matter what. I heard bullets hit in the weeds near me as the friendly soldiers nearest the terminal building returned fire and one then two enemy positions went silent. When the bullets stopped hitting near me, I low-crawled, still in the darkness, until I found other friendly soldiers, not in my unit. Soon, more came and we began to form up together in the darkness. Then once the sun came up, I found my unit and rejoined them. The radio never worked, the hard hit on the concrete runway had taken its toll. If you are connected to the internet and have Google Earth set up on your computer, you can find the exact spot. I landed on the runway and the exact spot. I low-crawled into high weeds. Go to Google Earth, Panama City, Panama. I landed at 9°03'50.53 north by 79° 22 minutes 59 seconds .44 west and 9°03'48.36 north by 79° 22 minutes 56 seconds .40 west was where I low-crawled to. As the acting S4 RTO, I was in a support position, and because the radio was not working, I was of no use to the S4 captain. He turned me loose so that I could commandeer a truck to transport water up and down the runway of the international airport to our battalion's different units who were positioned in the hot sun and running out of water. They were gratefully happy for this needed water and soon moved out in different directions, going on their combat missions. 3 days later, we were resting after a mission we had been on, where we confiscated a large number of weapons from an arms room. These weapons were captured at the Panama Defense Force, Battalion 2000 unit area. I had taken a bulletin board full of Panama Defense Force, Battalion 2000 members' photos from one of their offices back to the international airport, where I found prisoners who had not been identified as members of the Panama Defense Force, Battalion 2000, and pointed them out to the MPs, enabling them to separate out the officers and non-combatants. I had also taken a brand new AK-47 bayonet while helping to empty the arms room. It was still in its packing from the factory in Russia, and put it into my butt pack on my equipment belt. This would be my wartime treasure that I would show to my grandchildren in the future. I also commandeered an old brown flak vest from the Panama Defense Force, Battalion 2000 unit area, and was now wearing it. After turning over the bulletin board full of Panama Defense Force, Battalion 2000 members' photos to the MPs, I noticed people waiting by a phone, so I stood in line. There I called my bubby's grandmother in Panama and asked if everyone was okay, then asking her to please make sure all of the children stayed inside the house, as I knew they would want to run and see whatever was happening and could get shot or killed. I was worried about their safety as the fighting had been going on for 3 days, and I had not been in touch with them for 3 months. I then went to lie down next to my rucksack as I had not slept for many days. When I was asked by the S4 lieutenant did I know how to get to the Marriott Hotel, I answered yes, I have been there many times. He said to follow him, so I did. A minute later, I was standing among the S4 captain, the Delta Company commander, Delta Company First Sergeant, and the S4 lieutenant. The Delta Company commander was complaining about his being given a mission to get ammo, water, and food to one of our battalion's platoons that had been cut off from resupply for 3 days, saying that he did not know how to get there. I spoke up and said that I had just spent 2.5 years in Panama and knew how to get there easily. The S4 captain then asked for me to show the Delta Company commander how to get to the Marriott Hotel. I pointed to the map as I explained that all he had to do was get onto the highway next to the international airport and follow it west until he came to the Roosevelt Monument intersection, then to turn left and follow the same road until he came to the ocean and the Spanish fort ruins, then continue to follow the same highway as it took a right turn along the shoreline, continue a few miles alongside of the shoreline, and then he would see the Marriott Hotel. Go to Google Earth, Panama City, Panama International Airport, 9 degrees 03 apostrophe 50.53 north by 79 degrees 22 minutes 59 seconds .44 west. The highway, 9 degrees 04 apostrophe 13.64 north by 79 degrees 23 minutes 21 seconds .42 west. The Roosevelt Monument intersection, 9 degrees 01 apostrophe 52.96 north by 79 degrees 29 minutes 25 seconds .28 west. Turn right at the ocean, Spanish Fort Ruins, 9 degrees 00 apostrophe 23.96 north by 79 degrees 29 feet 10 inches .51 west. Marriott Hotel at that time in history, 9 degrees 08 apostrophe 59.20 north by 79 degrees 30 minutes 6 seconds .17 west. Then I pointed on the map at the Spanish Fort Ruins and said, the last time I was there, the PDF, Panama Defense Force, had their people stationed inside this building on the corner, and they were patrolling the area with AK-47s. You should get on the radio and get air cover so that when we get there, we are not ambushed. They can easily see us coming from a mile away. The S4 lieutenant spoke up and said, no, that's ours. Once we get there, we're safe. I said again, the last time I was there, the PDF had it, and they had AK-47s in clear view. Again, the S4 lieutenant spoke up and said, no. I heard on the radio, that's ours. Once we get there, we're safe. Again, I repeated myself and said, don't you want to just get on the radio and make sure? Look here on the map, they can see us coming from a mile away and set up a hasty ambush. Again the lieutenant said, no, that's ours. I heard it on the radio. Once we get there, we're safe. Can you get us to there? I spoke up and said, yes, I can get you there easily. Even so, don't you want to get on the radio and call to make sure? Again the lieutenant said, no, I know it's ours. At that time the Delta Company commander said, I don't like it. If I make a wrong turn and we get down a dead-end street, we can get ambushed and killed. I'm not going to do it. I then spoke up and said, I can go along with you and guide you. Look here on the map, as I showed him once again. The Delta Company commander spoke up and said, you would do that? I said again, yes, I volunteer to be your guide. The S4 captain spoke up and said, well, there you go, you have a guide. The Delta Company commander said, okay, if you'll go along with us as guide, I'll do it. I said, I will. The Delta Company commander then said, okay, let's go. The Delta Company commander then called over to the Sheridan tank commander and told him, you take the lead, we will pull in behind you. The Sheridan tank commander spoke up and asked, what do I do if I come upon a roadblock? The Delta Company commander then replied, don't stop for anything, just bust it down and keep moving. Don't stop for anything. I went to get my rucksack. Then walked over to the lead Humvee in the convoy and started to sit down in the front seat, where I needed to be as the guide. At that time, a platoon sergeant spoke up and said, no, you sit on the back. I spoke up and said, no, I need to sit in the front, I'm the guide. He spoke up again, saying, no, get in the back. I repeated, I need to be in the front, so I can give directions to the driver. He again said, no, you're right on the back. I then walked to the back with my rucksack, putting it over inside the back of the Humvee, next to the stack of MREs. As I walked to the back of the Humvee, a soldier, maybe the driver, said, I have a M203 grenade launcher, and you have an M16. The fighting position you will be in the back, is a M203 position. Where I am, is a M16 position. If we get into a fight, you will need a M203, and I will need an M16. So, let's trade off until the mission is finished. I said yes. And we traded off, knowing that we would find each other after the mission and trade back our weapons. I then started helping soldiers pick up the pile of rucksacks that were on the concrete runway at the back of the Humvee. The S4 lieutenant walked up and put his rucksack down in the pile to be loaded on the Humvee. Each rucksack I picked up felt like it weighed between 80 and 90 pounds. So I had to grip it firmly and give a good solid jerk as I picked it up and handed it to the soldier in the back of the Humvee. After picking up 5 or 6 of these heavy rucksacks, I came to the rucksack that the lieutenant had laid down. Expecting it to be as heavy as all the other rucksacks, I grabbed a hold of it firmly and gave a quick jerk, so that I could lift it up to the soldier in the back of the Humvee. It was so light that I easily lifted it over my head. Shocked at how light it was, I bounced it up and down in my hands, much like you would do a basketball or a football. I looked at the soldier in the back of the Humvee and said, "This rucksack is as light as a feather. It looks like it's full but is packed full with a pillow." At that point, the S4 lieutenant walked up. So, I turned to him, and while bouncing the rucksack in my hands I said, "This rucksack is yours, right, Lieutenant?" He became very quiet and wide-eyed. I then said, "This rucksack is as light as a feather. What have you got in here, a pillow?" He spoke up with a derogatory commanding voice and said, "What do you think, I'm stupid? I have to run." I was instantly insulted and started to argue with the lieutenant, to find out who else he gave out his equipment to, so he could pack his rucksack full with a pillow, ensuring that it looked full, to anyone that seen it. Still light enough he could run unburdened if he ran into an enemy. I heard someone yell, "Okay, let's go people, let's go." Everyone started jumping into the back of the Humvee. The lieutenant took off running in the direction of another Humvee. As I climbed up in the back of the Humvee there was only one small place for me to sit down, which was on top of a stack of MRE cases, on the right side of the rear of the Humvee. This left me totally exposed, as I was sitting up higher than anyone else and in the back of a turtleback Humvee. There was just barely enough room for my knees to fit in under the roof behind the person in the back seat on the right side. The trip was basically uneventful, as I guided by yelling my directions down to the person in the front seat, which was a platoon sergeant, and then he relayed over the radio my directions to the Sheridan tank commander. They had taken the lead. We were now the second vehicle. At one point, I spotted a small tank on a hill to the right and called it down to the people in the Humvee. I heard it repeated over the radio microphone. "Tank on the hill, to the right." As we came up on the intersection of the Roosevelt Monument, I called down my directions and said, "That's the Roosevelt Monument intersection, turn left." And the platoon sergeant repeated it over the microphone, "That's the Roosevelt Monument intersection, turn left." We then turned left and began heading in a southern direction. As we came to the first intersection after turning left at the Roosevelt Monument, we came upon a roadblock that consisted of 55-gallon drums cut in half and filled with diesel fuel, then caught on fire. As we neared them, the Sheridan tank skidded to a stop, which caused us to come squealing to a stop behind them. Then each individual vehicle behind us had to stop, which is called the slinky effect. As the platoon sergeant urgently screamed over the microphone, "Don't stop, keep moving. Don't slow down, keep moving." The Sheridan tank took off, and so did we, bouncing over the top of the squished drums and diesel fuel inflamed, now all over the street. I thought maybe somebody had thrown a big heavy rock, as I had heard no sound over the roar of the tank engine and the Humvee motor. The men with the AK-47s were now behind me. So, I looked down, in between my legs on the floor where it would have fallen. I could see nothing. As we continued to move forward, I looked to the left, because my lower hip was hurting like hell on the left side. Which is where I thought whatever hit me must have come from. There I saw people in the side street waving white handkerchiefs and yelling the word "Liberators." At that instant, I believed what hit my leg may have been a grenade, and again bent my head and eyes forward to look down between my legs on the floor of the Humvee to find it. Right then, at that exact moment, everything went black. A black tunnel had quickly closed in on me. I was passed out cold. The spot where the bullet went into the upper inside of my left leg and exited near the middle of the outside of my left hip scientifically proves that the shooter was on or near a third floor of a building and was most likely aiming at the platoon sergeant sitting in the front of the Humvee ahead of me. We were moving, as his head was at the same level of my gunshot wound. Remember that I was sitting in the back, up on top of cases of MREs looking over the top of the Humvee, and that puts my hips at the same level as his head and directly behind him, by about 3.5 feet. To find the place I was hit and then passed out, go to Google Earth, Panama City, Panama. Point your mouse at 9 degrees 01 apostrophe 29.45 and by 79 degrees 29 minutes 15 seconds. 39 inches wide and then zoom in. I passed out at Google Earth, 9 degrees 01 apostrophe 23.77 and by 79 degrees 29 minutes 14 seconds. 32 inches wide. I awakened as if I was in a tunnel and off, in the distance, every weapon in the world was firing bullets. It sounded like I was on a firing range back at Fort Bragg. Then I heard someone calling my name saying, "Sergeant Cloak, which way? Sergeant Cloak. Sergeant Cloak, which way?" I woke up at the Spanish Fort ruins, Google Earth, 9 degrees 00 apostrophe 23.58 and by 79 degrees 29 feet 10 inches. 53 inches wide, so you can see that I was passed out for 2 to 3 minutes, as that is how long it would take to drive that far. I have no memory of it. What fighting went on during that time period, I have no knowledge of. Slowly, my eyes began to focus as the sounds of bullets were hitting the Humvee, seemingly from every direction all around me. I turned my head and eyes to the right as an American soldier came running up to the wall on the side of the street of the old Spanish ruins. As I continued turning my head and eyes to the right, I could not twist through the pain in my hip far enough to look behind me down the street. Right in front of me, the man standing in the hole in the top of the Humvee for a gunner was firing his weapon off towards the PDF building, to our forward left. It was the building I had pointed to and described on the map that was the Panama Defense Force guard shack or guardhouse at the Spanish fort ruins. The one I had asked, "Why don't you just call on the radio and confirm that it's ours? Because they will see us coming from a mile away and ambush us." The man to my left on the back of the Humvee was pointing his weapon to the left front and firing. To the forward left was the only opening to fire through. At that moment, I pointed the M16 with 203 grenade launcher and started firing rounds into the window on the side of the building. The weapon jammed. After changing magazines and unjamming the weapon, I fired many rounds into that window. Then I took a high explosive round and put it into the M203 grenade launcher and fired it at the window, hitting the side of the building, all while sounds of everyone's weapons were firing all around me. Again, the voice yelled, "Sergeant Cloak, which way? Sergeant Cloak, which way?" Looking to our front, in front of the Sheridan tank, I could see that there was a school bus on its side, lying diagonally across the highway blocking our convoy. I yelled, "Around the bus, turn right." I was later told that the tires of that Hummer had 103 bullet holes. Immediately, the platoon sergeant repeated my command, "Around the bus, turn right." The Sheridan tank began pushing the school bus off the road as if it were a bulldozer bent on destroying anything in its path. Once the school bus was out of the way, our Humvee took off like the speed demon it was meant to be. America, you can hold your head up, and you can hold it high. That Humvee engine kicked into overdrive and came around that curve like a four-wheel drive dragster out of hell. It truly was a scene any patriotic movie director would be happy to film, with an American bald eagle soaring overhead while screeching a warrior's cry. PTSD bald eagle. Screech it loud and clear. Let go your warrior's cry, bald eagle. Let go your warrior's cry. Screech it loud and clear, bald eagle. Screech it loud and clear. American blood flows bright, it's clear. American blood has been shed right here. Let go your warrior's cry, bald eagle. Let go your warrior's cry. Screech it loud and clear, bald eagle. American blood has been shed right here. As tears fill my eyes, I remember this heroic event, never before told to the American public. The soldiers still able to fight were returning fire like the professionals they were trained to be. American soldiers were bogged down in an ambush, and we needed to get out of their way. They needed to move out of the kill zone. We did, and that Humvee engine continued to roar its way down the street. Suddenly, out of nowhere, another Humvee came alongside us and had to slow down to keep from passing us. How, I don't know. We were flying. Someone was hanging out the side with their head split open from a gunshot wound. The person next to him in the Humvee was holding onto him so that he did not fall out onto the street. He was out cold. They were yelling, "We have to stop. We have wounded, we have to stop. We have wounded, we have to stop right now." Immediately tires were screeching to a stop, while soldiers were jumping from the Humvees in all directions. As I twisted so that I could turn and climb out of the Humvee, a pain shot from my left upper thigh, lower left hip, up into my brain that said, "Don't you ever try to do that again. No, not ever." As I looked down toward my left hip, where the pain was coming from, I could see nothing. It was directly under my ammo pouch on my cargo belt. As I reached to pull it out of the way, what I saw was a spot in my uniform trousers that looked like it was ripped but also red with blood. 100% American blood, mixed through generations going back before the Civil War between the states. It was exactly where my leg creases when I am sitting down. The pain was so intense that I sat looking through black spots, trying to focus on the highway ahead of me. Everyone had disappeared, running off away from the Humvee in a direction off to my right rear, out of my sight. I was alone and could not twist to turn and see where they had gone. Again, the sounds of weapons firing took over my mind as I looked through the black spots, which were now growing larger. I felt as though I was going to pass out, as the black spots in front of me were becoming larger and larger by the instant. It was my energy draining away. Then someone walked over to me beside the Humvee and said, "Come on, get down." Trying to focus on his face, I replied, "I can't, I'm shot." He climbed up on the side of the Humvee and said in a disbelieving voice, "Where are you shot?" The disbelief in his voice gave me a little energy, so I pulled back my ammo pouch on my left side and said while pointing, "Right there." He leaned forward and looked, his eyes opened very wide as he focused on the exit wound and blood. Then he said loudly, "Oh my God. Don't move, I'll be right back." Seeming like an eternity later, 3 men gathered around me and twisted me out of my sitting position on top of the cases of MRS, ripping the torn flesh where the bullet had gone through even further. They had pulled my legs out from between the top of the Humvee and the cases of MRS, handing me to someone on the ground. The pain from twisting my leg while pulling me out was causing me to black out again. They then put me into the back seat of the Humvee on the right side and strapped me in with the seatbelt. Sounds of weapons firing sent everyone running, again to my right rear and out of sight. As I fought through the black spots engulfing my vision, the sounds of weapons firing in the near distance behind me out of my sight began to slow and then stop. Someone was yelling at me to get out of the Humvee. Each time I pushed on the release button on the seatbelt buckle, nothing happened, it would not release. I could not focus my eyes through the black spots before me but could feel the seatbelt buckle on my right side. My hands felt the button as I pushed it, it just would not release. Confused, I watched as our battalion surgeon, Captain, walked up to me while demanding that I get out so that he could take a look at my gunshot wound. I did not know he was with us. I had not seen him since we left our battalion area back at Fort Bragg days before. Now, seemingly out of nowhere, he had just walked up to me out of my peripheral vision, angry that I would not follow orders to get out of the Humvee, so that he could examine me. Again, he yelled, "Get out here and lay down, so I can take a look at you." As I tried again to push the release button on the seatbelt buckle, I said, "I cannot get the seatbelt off." He then tried, and when he could not get it to release, he took out his surgical scissors and cut the seatbelt in half. He then helped me to get out of the Humvee and to lie down on the ground. At once the world uproared around me as weapons began firing seemingly from every direction. I could not roll over, so I tried to look back in the direction of the bus that had been blocking the road minutes before by tilting my head back as far as I could see. At that moment, someone had a hold of my collar and was pulling me along the ground with them. The whole time weapons were firing all around us. The firefight was not over. I kicked with my right leg and foot, trying to help as the faceless soldier pulled me along the ground. Each time I tried to use my left leg, the pain called out to me throughout my brain, saying, "I told you never to do that again. Now look what you have gone and done." Soon I would be pulled and dragged over behind the walls of the old Spanish ruins as our battalion surgeon was trying to save the life of a soldier that was shot much more seriously than I had been. He had been in even another Humvee. As soldiers around me cut and pulled at my uniform to get it off of me, allowing the medics to see all wounds. I struggled against them, not understanding why they were undressing me, while weapons began firing once again, seemingly from everywhere around me. Unable to keep them from removing the flak vest, I turned my attention to my bulletproof Kevlar helmet by wrapping my arms around it and not letting go. I was out of my mind with confusion, while fighting black spots as to why they were totally undressing me in the middle of a firefight. I felt the need to point my weapon and pull the trigger but had good guys holding me down while cutting and pulling at my clothes. It didn't make any sense. Striding out, my leg had further ripped the muscle tissue in my lower left hip where the bullet had torn through it, causing the pain to overwhelm my mind, leaving me shaking and cursing until someone gave me a stick to bite on. I bit down hard on the stick as the pain worked to overwhelm my thought process and focused on the face of a red-headed sergeant I remembered from my days in the 505th, noticing a kind, understanding look in his eyes while wondering how he got there. Suddenly he pulls out from within his shirt pocket a small sucker or lollipop, puts it in front of my eyes, and says, "I'll trade you this for that stick." The calm understanding in his voice reassured me. So I took it, while taking the stick out of my mouth, and said, "Thank you. I don't understand why they are taking my clothes off." He only smiled. Soon the candy was gone, and I was back to biting on the stick. My concern was not motivated by fear but by pain and confusion, including my desire to respond in the correct manner. I was thinking about every little thing that was happening, considering each alternative, but ultimately the answers never came to mind. It was just too painful, too confusing. Over to my left, I could see our battalion surgeon working on a soldier who was unmoving. The world had gone silent. Soon I and two other soldiers, one shot in the arm and another unmoving, were all medevaced out in a Black Hawk helicopter. We landed at a MASH unit on the runway at Howard Air Force Base next to Fort Kobe, Panama. On the way there, a soldier who had been shot in the arm said, "I got him, Serge, he was in a window. I opened up on him, he went down." The rescue mission would continue without me as a guide. I was left in the helicopter once it landed so that emergency procedures could be performed on the more desperately injured soldier. He passed away. May God please bless his mother and father. Amen. PTSD. Bald eagle. Screech it loud and clear. Let go, your warriors cry. Bald eagle, let go, your warriors cry. Screech it loud and clear. Bald eagle, screech it loud and clear. American blood flows bright, it's clear. American blood has been shed right here. Let go, your warriors cry. Bald eagle, let go, you warriors cry. Screech it loud and clear. Bald eagle, American blood has been shed right here. Three hours after being shot, it was dark now. A member of the MASH unit dressed in all white walked over to me with a very large clear syringe. He took the stick out of my mouth, throwing it away. I was still shaking. The clear syringe was the size of a Coke can, filled with a clear solution. It had a large plastic point on the end of it with a large opening. The MASH unit member pushed it into my exit wound, injecting the entire contents. I screamed bloody murder, for the burning pain was more intense than the moment I was shot. The man in the white shirt grabbed a hold of me as if he thought I was going to rise up to start running. Then he said, "Oh my God! Oh my God! I thought you already had some morphine. That was pure alcohol." Angrily, I spoke up and said, "No, I've had nothing." He then said, "Wait right there, I will get you some morphine." Once I was given a shot of morphine, my lights went out. I woke up feeling like I was inside a freezer. As I looked around me, I could tell that I was inside of an army bus with a blanket over me. However, my bare feet were sticking out into the cold air. I would soon find out that I was in a parking lot at an Army air base outside of Ft. Sam Houston, Texas. The next day, I was given more morphine and spinal anesthesia so that the surgeons could cut out the dead or dying flesh of my gunshot exit wound. On the internet, Wikipedia states, spinal analgesia, or commonly called spinal anesthesia or subarachnoid block (SAB), is a form of regional anesthesia involving injection of a local anesthetic into the cerebrospinal fluid, CSF, generally through a fine needle, usually 3.5 inches long. A round hole large enough for a grown man to put his fist into was left to drain for days before it had to be elongated by cutting two large V-shaped cuts at the leftmost and rightmost portions of my gunshot exit wound. While sitting down, that is the uppermost and lowermost. This had to be done because the perfectly round hole, cut by the surgeons, could not be closed. The two large V-shaped cuts which elongated the exit wound allowed the surgeons to sew shut my gaping war wound after another spinal anesthesia. This left me with cerebrospinal headaches caused by the lumbar puncture into my spine, and me to hobble around on crutches for months to come. A few days later, I and all other wounded soldiers in our hospital ward were visited by President Bush, the 41st President of the United States. The day before President Bush and the First Lady showed up at the hospital to visit everyone that had been wounded on the same floor I was on. Men started showing up that were obviously Secret Service. This one particular man, who stood by a window near me, watched out into the distance, including down to the grassy area beside the building. He was wearing a suit that you might think was that of a family member, not a Secret Service member. He was obviously Secret Service, as his activity told me exactly what his job consisted of. Plus, he didn't talk to anybody that was in a bed who had been wounded in combat. That only confirmed my suspicion because of the jacket of his suit being more like a common man's jacket than that of a Secret Service man's jacket. Because of the spinal headaches causing me to pass out each time I lifted my head off of the pillow, I was not able to stand when President Bush shook my hand or walked around the room with the First Lady, meeting other more tragically wounded soldiers like my friend Sergeant Alameda, who had 109 pieces of grenade fragments and bone removed from his body because of a grenade thrown by an enemy soldier onto him, and the 2 soldiers with him who lost their lives. May God please bless their mothers and fathers. Amen. PTSD. Bald eagle. Screech it loud and clear. Let go, or warriors cry. Bald eagle, let go, you warriors cry. Screech it loud and clear. Bald eagle, screech it loud and clear. American blood flows bright, it's clear. American blood has been shed right here. Let go, or warriors cry. Bald eagle, let go, you warriors cry. Screech it loud and clear. Bald eagle, American blood has been shed right here. My daughter was there with me. My parents had brought her to see me. My life had taken my wife and my little bubby from a third world country all the way up to meeting the President of the United States, as they were there with me when the President arrived. I felt bad that there was not enough room for my father and mother to stay. We were told that my family was too big, someone would have to go. After photos with President Bush and that precious moment of shaking his hand and he had left, I needed to go to the restroom so badly that I forced myself to face the horrific headache and nausea as I hobbled my way to the restroom. Just then the Secret Service man was in the restroom washing his hands, so I spoke up and asked him how I could get a job with the Secret Service. Looking me straight in the eyes, he replied, "You don't want this job." I replied, "Yes, I do." He said again more sternly, "You don't want this job." Again, I said, "Yes, I do, I would love it." Very seriously, he says, "No, you wouldn't like it. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you a number to the Pentagon. You call this number and tell them I gave you the number and said for you to call them." I thanked him and took the piece of paper with the phone number back to my bunk and nearly passed out from the intensity of the headache I was enduring. Did he know something I didn't know? Apparently so. I was then taken into an operating room, again given a high dose of morphine. A spinal blood patch had to be done to close the hole in my spinal fluid sac, which was left open after I was given the spinal anesthesia before my operation when the doctor had elongated my gunshot exit wound. Now, the cause of my spinal headaches. They did the blood patch by taking a large amount of blood from my arm, injecting it into my spinal fluid around the area of my spinal anesthesia injections. This caused my back to lock or harden like a stiff rod of iron, hurting like hell for many days. However, it did stop the spinal headaches that were caused because each time I tried to lift my head or stand up, gravity pulled on the spinal fluid in my spine, causing it to leak out through the holes left in my spine from the needles, causing a type of suction on my brain. I was told that the blood would clot as it ran out the hole in my spinal sac and help it to heal faster. Soon I was awakened, asked to answer some questions for a magazine reporter. I did, as I was feeling very high from the morphine. It makes life a party. A few days later I was flown to Womack Army Hospital at Fort Bragg, being put into a ward there. 2 weeks later, I was given crutches and then sent back to my unit area. Once there, I was handed a set of cargo belt and shoulder harnesses with a butt pack. Told that it was mine, sent from Panama. When I opened it, the AK-47 bayonet I had put into it was not there. It was not my butt pack. I was highly disappointed not to have my war souvenir. Even so, a .45 caliber magazine loaded with military rounds was there. So I was happy to keep it as my war souvenir. Although years later, when I had taken my bubby to the country of Panama to meet his grandmother for the first time, my niece's husband got into my things and sold it for the money to buy a 6-pack of beer. When I had arrived back at my unit area for the first time, the driver's side window was smashed out of my car. I had left it in the parking lot and had given the keys to the ammo NCO of the S4 section, who had been left behind and told he was not needed during Operation Just Cause, so that he could give them to my wife when she arrived to pick up the car. He never had given her the keys and was walking around with his right fist in a cast up to his elbow. Did your eyes just open wide? They should have. 2 + 2 = 4. While there I was approached by the first sergeant, who had been left behind, and told he was not needed during Operation Just Cause. He complained about my being away from my job as Air Items NCO and wanted to know when I would be back. I explained that I was still on bed rest, but had been sent home and that I was at the company area because I wanted to talk to the S4 captain. The S4 captain was nowhere to be found. He was still in the country of Panama. 2 weeks later, I went to my chain of command to talk about what the S4 lieutenant had done by passing out his equipment to me and the other soldiers so that he could fill up his rucksack with a pillow. This took me to the S4 section sergeant, an E6 that was told he was not needed during Operation Just Cause and was left behind. As I explained to him what took place, he sent for the lieutenant. Once the lieutenant arrived, I expected the S4 section sergeant to have the same feelings I had about the situation. However, he did not. In fact, he teamed up with the lieutenant and the first sergeant, relieving me of my duties and assigning me directly under the first sergeant, inside his office as a clerk. I was soon standing in front of the S4 captain, being questioned about my interview with a magazine reporter. He was very angry and upset about what the reporter had put in a magazine article, which was my exaggerated value of the weapons we confiscated out of the PDF Battalion 2000 arms room and my phone call to my bubby's grandmother. I explained that I didn't remember much about my interview with the magazine reporter and that I was high on morphine during that period in the hospital, and I answered yes, that I had told the S4 lieutenant about calling my mother-in-law. The next day, many soldiers that walked by me inside the company area were making comments like, "I heard you got shot by friendly fire." It was always someone that was nowhere near me when I was shot or was left back at Fort Bragg during Operation Just Cause, told that they were not needed. From that time forward, I was treated rudely by all rank levels. The first sergeant even went as far as ordering me to falsify his PT records by changing his push-up count from 38 to 90 and his sit-up count from 32 to 89. And he watched to make sure I did it correctly. The duties I was responsible for as a clerk in the first sergeant's office was to keep all jump records updated for the 100+ men in our airborne infantry unit. Many times the first sergeant sent me on errands. One particular time he sent me to the PX to buy him a box of chocolate gummy bears. Then when I returned, my little bubby's mother, my wife, was sitting in his office talking to him. When I entered and asked her how long she had been waiting for me, she stated that she had just arrived and needed money to go shopping with. I asked her where my little bubby was. She said that she had left him with a neighbor. All through the history of the 82nd Airborne, a clerk in the first sergeant's office is exempt from pulling 24-hour duty. The first sergeant informed me that it no longer applied and had me pull 24-hour duty at least once a week. I had earned a Purple Heart, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Combat Infantryman's Badge, along with an Expeditionary Medal with Spearhead, for my actions during Operation Just Cause, but was never given an award in formation or allowed to participate in any awards ceremonies. My Purple Heart medal was simply left on a pillow while I was sleeping in a hospital after being wounded. My 2 Bronze Stars, Combat Infantryman's Badge along with an Expeditionary Medal with Spearhead was simply handed to me by use of a piece of paper, which were the United States Army orders, awarding them to me. By July 1990, I was no longer using my crutches and had begun to exercise with the headquarters platoon at my own pace. Late one afternoon after returning home and taking off my boots and socks, I walked over to sit down at my lazy boy chair to watch TV, when I stepped on something in the carpet, which sent a stabbing pain throughout my entire body. Something had driven its way all the way to the bone on the pad of my left foot just under my left big toe. Sitting down in my chair, I lifted my foot up to see a thick posted earring, the type that women used to wear back in the 1960s. My wife immediately started laughing. I did not think it was funny as it hurt intensely. I asked her whose earring it was. She claimed it was hers, while I claimed that I didn't know she had any earrings. She had never worn one before. I didn't feel good about the way she was laughing about it, but blew it off, as it must have been funny from her point of view. The next morning the spot where the earring went into the pad of my foot was burning. So I put a large band-aid and some salve on it. Once at my company area, I went to the medics. They gave me some Tylenol. 3 days later, it was so bad that a red bubble the size of a quarter had been swollen around the puncture wound from my stepping on the earring. I went to the medics again. They sent me to the hospital, saying that I had blood poisoning. At the hospital, I was admitted and put into the ward at the end of the hall, where I walked 2 years before when I had lockjaw from my dental visit and wanted to find the obese nurse that woke me by using my index finger to masturbate herself. After 5 days, the blood poisoning had started to move up around the side of my foot. So, I called home to speak to my wife and ask why she had not been to the hospital to visit. She claimed she could not find anyone to drive her there or to watch my little bubby. The doctor had taken samples from the puncture wound and sent them off to the laboratory. Meanwhile, he was giving me penicillin. When I had been in the hospital for 9 days, and the blood poisoning was continuing to crawl up my foot toward my ankle, the doctor changed to different penicillin and a much higher dose, exclaiming that the laboratory had found no reason for my blood poisoning. There was simply nothing there to cause it. 5 days later, the blood poisoning had almost reached my ankle on the top of my foot. The doctor told me that he was going to mix up a cocktail of every known form of penicillin, then add it to my four for the next 24 to 48 hours. He said, if the blood poisoning has not stopped moving up your foot within 2 days, I will have to amputate your foot. This caused me to call home to my wife and ask that she come by to visit me with my little bubby. Also to call my family and let my parents know what was going on. She still could not find anyone to drive her there as she did not know how to drive. It was past time to pray to my God, so I did, and I did it by the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, asking that the penicillin cocktail would work. During my examination 2 days later, the doctor said that the penicillin cocktail was working, and the blood poisoning had stopped moving up my foot toward my ankle. I was in the hospital for another week before I was allowed to go home on crutches with a week on medical leave. I then re-enlisted for 2 more years as my current enlistment was up, and I was in no shape for Ranger School at that time. A week later, I was in the country of Saudi Arabia performing duties during the first few days of Operation Desert Shield. The day after I had reported seeing the man that looked like Osama bin Laden, started the 2 months that the Saudi Arabian government would only give us one hot dog bun 3 times a day to eat because we were barbarians. It caused me to lose a lot of body weight, which I would not regain until after leaving the U.S. Army a year later. 2 weeks later, while running in formation with my unit, a lieutenant ran up beside me and said, "Cloak, why don't you just put a gun to your head and put yourself out of your misery?" Then ran back into the formation where he had come from. I complained to the first sergeant about it. He thought it was funny and laughed. I was writing letters and sending them home to my wife and my little bubby every chance I got. Even if it was just a piece of scrap paper that I had, I would draw a picture for my little bubby and send it home. I missed him deeply. By October, I had still not received any mail from home and was increasingly worried as to what the situation must be back home with my little bubby and his mother. Soon we were given 1 boiled egg with our 1 hot dog bun in the mornings. Then a week later, loaded on buses and taken to a fenced-in area along the side of a highway, which had unlivable mobile homes and a tent city off to the side. It was not army tents, it was Arabian tents. The rumor about my being wounded by friendly fire had gone through the entire battalion. It made the first sergeant happy when I would complain to him about it. Not stolen valor. A presidential photo speaks 1,000 words. To be continued in Part 8. Be ready for the truth. My name is Cloak. John Cloak 001. Life has thrust me into a world of undercover operatives. Without pay.